All right, everybody, welcome to another session with Fractional Exec. We've got a guest today. Eric Hunzeker is joining myself, Neil McLeod, and Scott Mingus. Eric is a member of the Fractional Exec community, and he was kind enough to contribute some content for us, and it was great. He and I had a coffee shop conversation about ideal customer profiles. AI will not fix bad positioning, but it will scale it. That was the article headline.
Yeah, to your point, it's the ICP definition, without question, is like, this is where this shows up. Most companies define their ICP, their ideal customer profile, too broadly. There's a lot of defining it as the theoretical number of organizations or people that in theory could buy your product or your solution. And what they really need to be focused on is who is most likely to actually buy it. There are, in fact, roughly 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States. How many of those 18,000 were actually in the serviceable addressable market for Penlink? Maybe 3,000 of them. I mean, the reality is, in that business, they're selling investigative software to law enforcement agencies that exploit criminal communications and other forms of digital evidence to pursue cases. And the reality is, of the 18,000 law enforcement agencies, there's a lot of them that are one patrolman who's in a town of 1,500 who doesn't do any investigations, or it's a constable in the state of Texas that doesn't do any investigations. And so by the time you take out, here's who actually does investigations, but even then, maybe you're down to 5,000 or 6,000. Who does enough of these and as frequently enough every day, all day long, that they can really justify the spend on a tool to do this more efficiently? And it whittles the number down really, really quickly. Once you narrow that down, you really have to think about, okay, inside of that now narrowed view, what are the personas, the different roles of people that they play in those organizations, and how do you speak specifically to them about the value represented by what you deliver? Speaking to a chief of police is very different than speaking to the investigator or the detective, if you will, and that's very different than speaking to the the technical support operations person, and that's even more different than speaking to the supporting intelligence analyst. So, like, once you've narrowed that view down to I like to call it the center of your dartboard, there's even inside of that center, like, very specific roles that you need to understand how they think about the value you create and what words they use to describe their pain points and how you can solve them.
Obviously you've got background and experience in sales and marketing and product, and I don't think we gave you a chance to talk much about that, but it's clear to me that expertise allows you to coach people on narrowing who the focused audience should be and how you should talk to that audience and who within that audience you should talk to. So, sort of paraphrasing what you just said, I've got one startup I've been working with that knows exactly who he's going after, and that's one of my favorite things about working with that particular company is he's like, it's the 370. He's got 370 targets. He knows the number. He knows who the top 10 of those 370 are, and he is very clear about his positioning and messaging. So it's refreshing. So tell me, from your perspective then, how do you actually go about figuring out that problem space with your clients and as a former leader within an organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think it really gets to the crux of the challenge. So, like, let's move beyond some sort of my GovTech public safety background, which I know really well. I recently was working with one of the founders of a business who sells a technology solution to campground operators. I was working with her to understand what's the center of your dartboard. As luck would have it, this is not really luck. It happens in most markets. There is a source or multiple sources on the internet. You can go find a directory of every campground in North America, and when you pull that directory down, there's about 13,000 campgrounds. And so it's just a conversation with her, and she really understands, I feel, her market pretty well. I'm like, so there's a lot, and this database comes down with a lot of attributes, like what type of campground is it? How many spots do they have? How long are they open during the year? Some other attributes and so forth. And in that discussion, we figure out that, well, probably where we want to start, at least, maybe not that, it could be a little bit narrower than our total addressable market, but a good place to start, we think, is city-owned and operated or county-owned and operated regional campgrounds. It's going to be tougher to get into the feds. It's going to be tougher to get into state-run or other private campgrounds and so forth. But we think these city and county ones are like ripe for the picking. Okay, when we take that database and literally throw it into a spreadsheet, but we apply some filters to this and we say, let's just talk about city, county, regional campgrounds, that 13,000 turns into 3,000 really quick. Right? So, well, what else is important? Well, probably they need to be open most of the year at least. Okay, let's apply a filter that says they're open at least 6 months of the year. Boom. Now we're down to 2,700. Okay, they probably need to be pretty big too. Like little tiny campgrounds, our value proposition isn't going to be nearly as impactful. So what if they only have 50 spots? Boom, that number goes down to 500. Okay, what other attributes matter? Well, do they charge money to camp there? Because there are some campsites out there that actually don't charge money, and this system wouldn't be very useful for those folks. So we apply that filter, and the number gets down to right around 450. So your number, as your initial kind of center of the dartboard, I find to be a super helpful number because it's manageable. And you don't feel compelled to have some kind of an automated solution to go start attacking it. I know that it's only 400 or 350 or 250 or 500. Like if we just start a dedicated outreach campaign directly to people we can identify associated with those organizations, we can start to learn what really matters to them. And so it's just that sort of methodology of really understanding what are the attributes of organizations within your market where your value proposition is going to really matter, and apply those filters, get really focused. And we're not saying, like, to be clear, we're not saying these are the only 450 campgrounds that are ever going to buy this solution. We're saying these are the 450 I want to start with, and I want to reach out to, and I want to do a lot of learning about how our message resonates with them, so that when we're ready to apply tools like AI to ramp up our outreach, we're going to be hitting the mark.